I don't know if anybody on the stage needs introduction, but next to me is Dr. Paul Jacobs, Chairman and CEO of Qualcomm. Rod Roddenberry is the founder and director of the Roddenberry Foundation. Henry Tirri, you met earlier. Dr. Peter Diamandis, you met earlier as well. So we're going to have a conversation about the use of prizes to spur innovation. And there are two competitions going on under X Prize banner now, as you know. And I have to reflect that in 2007, we had a panel called What Can Healthcare Learn from Hollywood? And I had this conference with 3 TV producers up talking. So this is real. And I'm going to start maybe with Rod, if I may. You know, your father, Gene, envisioned the technology for the tricorder through his Star Trek series. And, you know, here we are bringing 23rd century technology into the 21st century, which we dearly need. So, you know, share your thoughts about making science fiction real over the next 3 years.
Well, I have to say, years ago, I wouldn't have thought we'd be where we are today. In fact, the future presented in Star Trek seemed somewhat far off. But as I began to meet people in the technology space, I began to realize that we were a lot further ahead than I think many of us really realize. I think a lot of you out there probably realize it because you're here and you've heard it these last couple days. But I feel like I've only recently been introduced, and my eyes have recently been opened to this world and what we are capable of. And it is really mind-blowing. It's very exciting. It's something I want the public to know about. And you know, I think Star Trek isn't a product of the 23rd century. I think it's going to be here in the 21st century. So I'm very excited to be alive when it's happening.
3 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Peter, would you briefly describe the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize and the Nokia Sensing X Challenge in case we have some new attendees?
Proudly. Back in January of this year, Paul was opening CES. I had the pleasure of joining him on stage to announce a $10 million competition funded by the Qualcomm Foundation called the Tricorder X Prize, Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize. And this is really to develop a set of handheld, if you would, mobile consumer devices that will utilize a whole range of technologies, lab on a chip, digital imaging, cloud computing, AI, that will enable the consumer basically to diagnose themselves ultimately better than a board-certified doctor. It's effectively putting healthcare in the palm of your hands. And it's really, what are all the modern-day technologies that can be used? We announced it amazingly. I'm still shocked. We have 185 teams from over, I think, 26-odd countries around the world competing. And so this is about taking these technologies, integrating them into a device, giving it to a consumer, and then having that consumer actually, in this case, be able to diagnose 15 different disease states for themselves. And it's really the beginning of the tricorder. It's version 0.9. Will go on from there. One of the things that's critical to the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize is going to be the sensors. And it's because of that, the importance of the sensors, we are here today with Henry to announce the Nokia Sensing X Challenge, which is really a competition looking around the globe to bring to us all the coolest, best, most powerful biometric sensors, environmental sensors available that will ultimately partner together and become part of the various tricorder devices that are being assembled. So it's really a family of competitions.
So it's bringing reality to that Economist article, The Doctor in Your Pocket.
It is the doctor in your pocket that will soon become the doctor on a chip that will soon become the doctor embedded in your body.
And the doctor's head is in the clouds, or in the cloud.
Yes.
So, Paul, does the world need a tricorder?
I think this is going to be a really important device to bring out, because if you look at kind of healthcare around the world, I mean, it's bankrupting the developed world, and it's inaccessible or not adequate in the developing world. And so the notion that we can have a device that consumers can use to diagnose themselves and get better results, I think is a very, very positive step. And if you look at the developing world, you can imagine that more lightly skilled healthcare workers can go out and provide healthcare in situations where people nominally wouldn't have gotten it, or would have had to go through very, very, long journeys to get somewhere, or these kinds of things. So I think having this idea of having a tricorder is really an important technology. And for us, we've been in this space, as you know well, for a long time, and the competition is really about focusing effort. There's a lot of companies out there, and a lot of startups, and a lot of researchers in the labs building different kinds of sensors and different AI technologies, but we really needed something that would catalyze it. And I think this idea of the tricorder, because Star Trek has inspired so many different technology advancements, like the cell phone, that idea is something that people can come together around. So we need the tricorder in that sense too, as a vision of what's possible to inspire people and to bring people together to do something incredible.
It's a mind-boggling challenge. So do you have a personal story about Star Trek?
Me?
You personally, yeah.
I got a lot of stories about Star Trek. Let's see. Probably the best one was, this is in 1997, I think it was. We launched a phone called the Q phone, and it was the first phone that had an internet browser on it and data. I don't know, Henry, you might argue with me about that, but anyways. Had a little internet browser on it, and so we actually had Q and data from the Star Trek series come and introduce it. But the funny thing was, we met Brent Spiner and his agent at a dinner before the show, and we were talking to him about Qualcomm and all this stuff. And so he got excited about Qualcomm, and he went around and told all of his friends in Hollywood that they should buy Qualcomm stock. And if you remember the history of Qualcomm, 1999 we went up 25 times. So this guy was like everybody's best friend in Hollywood. They thought he was the world's best stock picker. And so anyway, so we got invited back to the set and stuff like that, so of the movies and so forth. But that was a pretty funny experience.
So he was there for the rocket launch of Qualcomm's stock.
And he got his friends in at just the right time.
Yeah. So Rod, were you there?
No, I wasn't there at the time, but it seems appropriate that Data was.
Henry, so I say to, on behalf of all of us to Nokia, welcome to the community.
Thank you.
Because we need new actors, new players. Who would have ever thought that Qualcomm would be a medical device company, which it officially is now, but that's another story. So how significant is the health vertical and the health sector in your mind to the future of Nokia?
Yeah, I've always said that there's multiple different things when the new technology enters the arena. And for me, this computing technology advances, having these computers that are both wireless and, by the way, the first generation of computers have natively sensors in them. You open up totally new possibilities. So normally you think about it that you bring things to much more casual computing arena, things that happen in the real world, and we all talk about entertainment, sharing information, but you also at the same time bring this same technology to those other meaningful parts of your life, education, health, even the cases of your survival, like in agricultural sort of development, environmental development. So all of these different type of areas that we see emerging from the technology are really super important for us. because those are the drivers of the technology. Technology by itself doesn't do too much. I mean, if you don't find the ways that people use it, it becomes just a gimmick and it's not useful. Health, and particularly looking at the properly mentioned, the challenges we have in growth economies, people who don't have any access to any kind of health system, not even the collapsing one, it's truly, truly important. It's important personally, it's important for Nokia.
So sensors is a general term. Why don't you talk about, or Paul or Dr. Diamandis, about the types of sensors that you think are going to be included in these devices?
Do you want to start or?
No.
Okay. Good. So I was very polite. Now I can go on. So I did mine.
This was our backstage joke. We were going to make Peter answer all the questions.
Yeah. So anyway, I find very interesting that you have different types of sensors. You have sensors which are embedded in the device in the sense that they are built to the device. So they are either part of the electronics or become like components in the electronics, or they are sort of components that are associated with the electronics. So you have GPS, you have different type of, for me, all radio is actually sensing, by the way. So I think the interesting things will happen when we go more and more dynamic sensing of the spectrum. For example, we will see this type of spectrum sensing by radios, and people usually don't think camera or microphone or radio normally as sensors. To me, they are absolutely sensors. But then you have also the sensors that are built to the materials. For example, you can have a chemical sensing. I was earlier talking about the nano nose, meaning that you have basically the sort of ability to use the material to do differentiation on chemical sensing on the device surface itself. So I see the sensors that we talk about here ranging from any chemical, sort of physiological sensor to those sensors that are sort of almost like being piggybacked, that they are already there in the device. And I think, and I believe, and let's make this as a prediction, that one of the most interesting things that we will see in this, what people call sensor fusion, putting multiple different sensors together and going, is going to be that you use a sensor that was originally for something totally different in a way that is very sort of surprising, like camera to do detection of some kind of a chemical phenomenon. Because of the accuracy of like these very high accurate cameras that you have, you can start looking at, for example, pollution level or something like that. So my prediction is that the really interesting things come from the fact that you have a sensor that was developed for something, but we're actually going to use it totally differently.
I agree. Paul, you're next.
He's trying to play out.
He's the moderator.
Come on, Paul, you've been
Yeah,
thinking
he's trying
about
to
it.
reverse the game, and it doesn't work very well. There's two of us.
You know what? The things that I think are going to be surprising are the fact that I think that people will actually start to be willing to embed sensors inside them. So I mean, we see a bunch of things about sensors that you'll wear and things that are embedded in the devices that we carry, but the notion that you might be willing to have something in your body, I think it's probably most people would object to that now.
I'll do
On
it.
the other, you do it?
I'll do it.
All right, we're going backstage after.
It better be a small sensor, and it's got to be implanted the right way.
Yeah. That is like, I'm gonna take that
Wait a
softball
minute.
and hit that one out of the park. But anyways,
Pretty fair. If you're experimental, you never know what happens. You know?
that mic's looking. Now I'm blushing.
Did you lose your concentration?
Yeah, I did lose my concentration. No, actually, so talking about embedded sensors in your body, and so there are people now, there are researchers who are finding biomarkers for things like heart attacks. 2 weeks before you have a heart attack, cells start dying and things start flowing in your bloodstream that can be detected through something that's sitting in your bloodstream. There was a study that was done at USC on implantable defibrillators where mortality rates were reduced 50% by having that pacemaker be able to be interrogated remotely instead of having to go into the clinic to get it looked at. So huge, huge improvements in people's quality of care, the ability to detect things in the future, different conditions by having it actually sitting in your bloodstream. And you know, who knows what will happen with you know, diabetes, glucose monitoring. I mean, right now you have a continuous glucose monitoring, but it means there's a needle that's sticking in you. And I actually tried this myself for a week, and I mean, it's interesting, but if you're not diabetic, I'm not so sure you're going to be willing to have something stuck in you all the time. But if it's, you know, maybe a one-time operation gets put in, maybe you're susceptible to heart attack. I mean, I'm pretty sure people would be willing to do that.
Yep.
There's an analogy of a meta approach that I think is important to give an example. I was just giving a talk to the executive team at Symantec. And Symantec, you know, is virus protection software, and many people have it loaded in their computer. And they realized at one point, when after they had over 100 million downloads, that they were able to utilize their software on all of these platforms and anonymize the data they got back. So they could actually look at where those computers, what websites they went to, what software was downloaded, and they began to understand what situations increase the probability of infection and what situations decrease the probability of infection. So one of the things that I find extraordinary is the future we're creating here, in which you're going to understand, as you're moving into and out of environments, what's better for your health or worse for your health, and you're going to start to get dashboards that allow you, as I like to say, to become the CEO of your own health and make intelligent decisions. Never again is ignorance going to be an excuse someone could have.
So what you're saying then is that we are going to be the sensors. Our bodies are going to be the sensors for other people.
We're ultimately 100 million sensors moving in, eating foods at restaurants, breathing air, drinking water, going into different population centers, and the mega data sets that are coming out of this, you know, infinite computing, analyzing that, is going to allow us to understand and extract information that has never before been available to us.
Which, I mean, this is actually happening today, right? I mean, there are things where Google can figure out when, you know, when a flu outbreak is happening because they see the search term. So I think sensors are going to be even broader than, you know, maybe what we've been thinking.
So this is all kind of focused on smartphones. We're all excited about smartphones now. Are we going to be beyond smartphones in 5 to 10 years?
I hope not.
Are we going to? Will we have 5 smartphones? I mean, are you going to be selling us? We'll have some that are implanted and some that we carry around in our pocket.
I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with form factors. It's pretty hard to say exactly what will happen. I mean, certainly people are gravitating to having something that they can touch. So, you know, how that'll evolve over time, whether things will disaggregate and you'll, you know, we have this model that we're thinking about, kind of continuous interaction model, where you're wearing a headset that's always talking to you. You can pull a display out that's always on, you leave it in front of you, or it's on your watch, or something that's, you know, can tap you, it can whisper to you, it can do these kinds of things. And I think you'll have more and more interactions that are less active going into the future, but I still think there's going to be times when you're going to pull out the thing because you want to read something or look something up or see a picture or take a picture or those kinds of things. So I think having some kind of a device that's somewhat similar to a smartphone today, that will be part of it, and then we'll have disaggregated things, and then also we're going to have stuff in the environment around us that will interact. So you'll ad hoc be able to use a screen that's an environment, or a speaker, a microphone, or, you know, whatever it is, a camera that's in the environment you just want to use. So I think those kinds of things will happen as well.
Yeah, I actually believe very much that computing has, up to this point, regardless what we talk about distributed computing and, you know, have multiple different computers and connected with network, it's always been embodied basically to one physical thing that's the primary thing, and then you have peripherals and something like that. I believe that because of both of the technology development, but also because of the use cases that are coming from the consumers, we will have these multiple different devices that offer seamless experience by being so deeply intertwined with each other that we don't actually think we are using different devices. We're just, some of them are very small and they are alerting us on some stuff. When we need to do, for example, something related with entertainment and media, we end up in a different device. By the end of the day, like Paul was mentioning, you go somewhere and the environment will reflect to your device, big screen, seeing and having an interaction. So the notion of smartphone, as I've always said, it's just a term for a certain era of certain devices. Similar functionalities will follow. We probably will still want to communicate by voice to a degree. So if you call that the phone, it's going to be a phone for a long time.
Qualcomm clothing?
It's definitely, I mean, stuff will definitely be embedded in your clothing. You're already seeing things like that happen, so, yeah.
So you bring up consumer adoption. I think that's a really good topic. And this could be really for any of you might have a perspective on this. But so we have a tricorder, multiple sensors, ability to provide diagnostic support. How do you see the adoption curve for something that's never existed before?
Can I, this is not my area, but if I could jump in, I'm curious how you educate the public on this, because I think there's definitely a concern and there's arguably a fear from a lot of people to have a device or a sensor on you that's transmitting data about you. I mean, we're all scared of our Facebook pages and who sees those. Imagine you've got something on you that's transmitting data about your health, about your diagnostics, whatever the case may be. I went out and I had a few drinks. I've got a hangover today. This data is getting transmitted out. Who's picking that up? So I'd be curious, how are people going to educate the public about this? Because you can't be afraid of this technology. It's going to happen whether we like it or not.
So Peter, I'm very interested in hearing your comment on this.
Thanks, guys.
We were really worried about that with location technology. We put GPS in the phones a long time ago, and in fact, even before that, Qualcomm had a system where we put messaging on long-haul trucks, and it had a location technology that was pre-GPS, and we were worried that the truckers would, really object to a Big Brother kind of thing. But it comes down to the value received versus what you feel like you're giving up, and you can see that there's a huge spectrum right now in the world today. I mean, kids, they don't seem to care that much about their privacy at all. And so it may just be a generational thing. Now, I think it's the case that health information and financial information, people are going to care a lot about that stuff. And so making sure that you architect these systems so that they are secure is going to be critical. Nothing is perfectly secure, by the way. I mean, nothing today is either. So I don't know that we might be increasing the attack surface a bit, but I think those kinds of security spills, they will happen some. But it's a question of what are you going to get out of it. Financially, you can get a lot out of it. Health information. I mean, is there a reason to go attack somebody's healthcare database? I don't know. Maybe there is. I can't think of why somebody would do that, but maybe they would. But that could happen today. I mean, there are databases that contain healthcare information today, and so I don't know that we're gonna change that radically going forward. It might be just more volume of data, but if you think about a thing that you don't think a lot about carrying around, which tells the wireless operator where you are at all times. I mean, you carry your cell phone around, and that thing is transmitting all the time where you are, because that's how the call gets routed to you. People just said, that's fine, I'm going to make that trade-off because I want to get called wherever I am. So I think those trade-offs get made.
Your first point, Paul, is obviously the most important, the value proposition against risk. So, notionally, when stories start getting out that this person's life was saved because they were monitored, and when your life insurance or your health insurance drops 10x because you're being monitored and all of these things, the value proposition is going to be such that, yeah, sure, people can, a lot of people are resistant to technology. And it's only after they start using their cell phone or using email or using Dish TV or whatever it might be that they say, wow, this is actually pretty useful. And then they put aside those issues.
A general lack of understanding.
Well, so humans are resistant for change. Fundamentally, we resist fundamental change. Until we start adopting it, using it, then we resist giving it up afterwards. And I think this is going to be something that there will be the haves and have-nots, but a lot of these people will be self-imposed have and have-nots.
Well, and people who are sick, I mean, who have a chronic disease and are,
they'll do anything.
They can manage it much better or more conveniently. I mean, they will adopt it. There's no question in my mind that adoption will happen quickly.
I also agree on I always say it's an incentive question, that if you don't have any incentive to do things, then most of the default is no. Because if you don't have any incentive, why would you? Because there's a risk. But I also want to point out something else. There's a multitude of things that you can do in a way, and Peter was already referring to them, which have nothing to do with privacy. And I use the analogy of traffic. You can do traffic modeling by anonymous probes around, whatever, and you can see that there's traffic congestion, and you don't need to identify anybody, anything. You can do epidemic analysis by just knowing that there's enough of something happening in some part of the area, and it's very useful for basically the sort of health monitoring or governmental inspection of things, and finding out if there's areas which are more dangerous and some others. So there's also this aggregate information, which is sort of statistical information that has no privacy indications whatever. And people usually confuse these two also.
But we do see cases already today where there's enough fear that legislation happens. And so I heard the story that in Germany, if you have an electronic medical record, after a certain period of time, which might have been as short as 30 days, you have to change the record, and you can't refer back to a previous record. And so we were hearing from, I think it was George Halverson of Kaiser was telling this story, and he was saying that they were going to a dialysis center and they couldn't even tell their mortality rates anymore because they didn't have a long enough sample. I mean, it's nuts, So crazy things do happen out there because of fear. So your point is very well taken, and we need to make sure that the education happens.
And this is a global device that we envision, accessible to everyone.
And so my question becomes, especially to Qualcomm and Nokia, is the marketplace for this future of healthcare sensing going to explode in the developing world versus domestically, because regulatory barriers are lower there? When I sit down with Peggy Hamburg, the FDA administrator, and say, is my cell phone going to become FDA regulated? That's a scary proposition.
Yes. The answer is yes. It's going to happen in the developing world first.
Yeah.
Because it already is happening. I mean, we already have wireless operators in India, for example, that are providing healthcare services using their call centers and the phone to give checkups for 10 times lower cost. I mean, it used to be $10, now it's $1. And that kind of stuff, it's much, much harder to have it happen in the US. And like you say, I mean, we've run into the situation already where if you have a sensor that's talking to your phone and the phone is just backhauling the information, but it's being used for diagnostic or therapeutic purposes, the phone needs to be certified as a medical device, which is why we built the TuneNet thing. We said, okay, fine, we're going to make a cell phone-like thing, which is a medical device. So the reason why that exists is just so the FDA is happy having a regular medical device, one that's doing something for your body, talk to another thing, which is a medical device, and then off into the cellular network. And it is completely due to FDA regulation. So,
well, the founder of Apollo Health, which serves a mere 90 million people today, and whose motto and goal is to serve 1 billion hearts, is working in an environment where they have the same number of cardiologists in India that we have here in the United States, with 3 times the population and much worse traffic. You just can't get to them. So that is where we need it. So maybe final question, really for the group, for any of you, how surprised do you expect to be with the outcome? Do you think you can predict what this tricorder with sensing is going to look like?
I'll give one point of data and then pass it down the line, if I may. Which is one of the things that's been the coolest thing about the X Prize competitions we've had, has been the diversity of teams, and how teams who have nothing to do with the field, who are literally outside the field. I use the example with the Wendy Schmidt oil cleanup competition. One of the teams that made it to the finals that blew everybody away was a team that met in a Las Vegas tattoo parlor. Kid you not. And they came up with technology that more than doubled the industry standard for cleaning up oil spills. So this is what, for me, is most exciting, is who's coming at this with a crazy idea that is really the breakthrough concept because it's completely outside the field.
So I always say that I measure surprise as a measure of quality, because if I have excellent people and I want, my expectations is that something excellent will happen. So how can excellent people can ever be, better than excellent people? So I say that when you surprise me, you sort of exceed and you give a bar. So the people that will be participating will be excellent. They will be really great teams and really sort of passionate people that sort of do things. So that's my normal expectation. That wouldn't surprise me. So there will be good and interesting things that will be coming out. What will surprise me, and again, the prediction of a surprise, but I don't know what the surprise is that there will be a viral thing that will come out of it. Something which will actually, in an accelerated manner, to take off. It just really literally changes in a very short period of time, then something which we consider to be, okay, it's going to be next decade, 2022, maybe we get there. And then I really believe that we would achieve what we are looking for. Even if I see a single one of this, because then I know that it would have been, it's a result of this particular exercise that we do.
I'd say my passion and my excitement for being here is not just the technology that's being presented here, but it's the people who are doing it. Star Trek 45 years ago inspired a lot of people to believe in themselves and to see that future and want to live in that future. And inspiration's really the key as far as I'm concerned, the way I'm looking at this in sort of a macro level. And I think the challenges and the prizes put on really do inspire people. And I think everyone here, up here and down there, are inspiring people. And I want this to get out to the public, what we are capable of, what you guys are producing. I think a lot of people out there don't really know the technology that exists. You see these things on TV and you do think it's sci-fi. But we are, I think, light years ahead of where the public thinks we are. So I really encourage everyone here to share what they know, to share their technologies, and to share their view of the future with as many people as you can, because it will inspire someone to create the next great thing.
So I personally, I'm not going to be surprised at all if the prize is won. I think the prize will be won. I think they'll exceed our expectations even in terms of how high of quality the solution is. But I think what will be surprising is something to do with the cost of the solution. I don't think it's going to be like I think there will be teams that will like throw a lot of stuff at something, and there's going to be teams that are going to be really, really clever, and they're going to find a way to do something that will get spread out to the emerging markets. Because this notion that we can touch people all around the world, instead of just building it kind of like a lot of medical technology has been built in the developed world, more and more and more expensive. This, I think, people are going to focus on how do I get the cost down so it can be widespread. And I think that, I hope to be surprised happily in that way.
That is what we need, access to affordable, quality care. So we're going to have a few minutes for questions. So get prepared. We have some microphone runners out there. In the meantime, we have one from the Twitter world. And this could be for any of you. What health ailments are most likely to benefit from this first round of this technology?
Can I ask a question first?
Certainly.
How long ago was that tweeted that you have it printed on paper?
This is a new technology. This is actually, there's a little flexible chip in here made by MC10, and it appeared. I had it in this book.
All right, what was the question again? I forgot already.
Who's this going to benefit first? What health ailments? Who put some thought into that?
The tricorder or?
The tricorder, yeah.
I would guess it will be something around a set of acute diseases in emerging markets. That'll be the thing that'll probably be the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So do we have some questions out there? Do we have a shy crowd? Yep.
Well, you guys don't want to answer that question?
No, I was looking. I I didn't see any
So
volunteers.
Peter, you were supposed to answer all the
Yeah, I
questions.
know medical
about medical
questions
stuff.
were for Peter.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Nagesh Malagari, and I moved here from Milwaukee after working for GE Healthcare for a long time. So I understand the wireless healthcare space, but I want to hear from you as to what might be a potential intersection of wireless healthcare with genomics or something. Like how do you envision from Qualcomm side or from Nokia side or from Express side, Peter?
I'll jump in. So,
Oh, finally.
Good, yeah.
There we go.
So this was addressed to Qualcomm and Nokia and
Yeah,
Peter's
but
answer.
go ahead.
Okay, so go ahead.
I know, I'm just a slacker. So there, we actually have something called the Archon Genomics X Prize right now, which is asking teams to sequence whole human genomes faster than ever before. When Craig Venter sequenced his genome back in 2001, it cost about $100 million, took about a year's time. The target we've asked teams to do to win the Archon Genomics X Prize right now is a 365 million-fold improvement in terms of speed and a vast improvement in terms of accuracy. And there are basically lab-on-a-chip capability. So I think one of the elements that that the sensors from this Nokia Sensing X challenge and the Qualcomm tricorder will actually be the ability to do rapid pathogen sequencing. So you cough on something and it tells you what the pathogens are in your sputum. Now what makes it exciting then is really the whole world of preventative medicine, where if you're in the developing world and you do that and all of a sudden a virus or a bacterium gets sequenced that the genome isn't recognized, it gets uploaded to the cloud and the CDC gets called to sort of prevent the pandemic from happening in the first place. That's an exciting future to be part of.
Yeah, I would just have answered the same thing, that for me, genomics is analysis on a particular data that you sense, and if you can build those sensors to be cheap enough and embeddable enough, I do not see any borderlines anymore. It's just part of the overall system.
It also helps you at the restaurant when you say, "What is that food?" and you go, "Zap." Oh.
Well, you don't necessarily always want to know. But coming back to the using, I see that's a really interesting domain where it's almost like genomics being the background information of your physical body, and then you have like the temporal information that is coming from the environment or the context, and then combining those, and certain things then, as we know, become prevalent at the point of time. So I think it's a very exciting part of that, but I see it like really not in any kind of a different field that we need to.
Or would you use it in your dating circumstances? No.
He comes with all these examples. I mean, I'm trying to be very serious about the health.
I think, the other piece is the treatment side. So tailoring drugs so that they actually work for people, because we know there's many instances there where the drug is useless because that person doesn't have some gene that makes them susceptible. So I think that's another area. And actually, when we were doing the CES speech, Eric Topol got up and showed a device that showed whether I think it was for Plavix or something, whether you were susceptible or not, and it was just a little sequencing thing, and it didn't do a full sequence, but it did a small subset, and told you whether that was good for you. So you can think of people taking these devices, relatively lightly skilled healthcare workers in developing nations, going out with these kinds of things and doing those tests to figure out whether somebody can get treated, and thereby saving an awful lot of cost of misuse of, or I don't know, not helpful use of expensive drugs.
Yep.
This is massively accessible health for the developing world, and it's massively disruptive for the developed world.
For the existing medical infrastructure we currently have.
Yep. Access to knowledge in the hands of consumers. Think of Napster and music industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 4 years and spent a lot of money to go to medical school, and the question is, the economics for that are going to change substantially.
Yeah. Do we have other questions out in the audience?
I've got a question. For Rod, we're talking about partnerships, and obviously we've got technology and medical, and I wondered if you could speak to perhaps those Comic-Con fans, right, that are not only familiar already with the concepts, right, through and through, but also have technology backgrounds who are exceptional creatives. And I wonder if you have any words of encouragement for their participation in this competition.
Well, there's a common perception of the Star Trek fan. And I've got to say, throughout my years of meeting them, most of them have been exceptional individuals. While not all of them have been in the world of technology, the ones who are really thinking outside the box. I know that's sort of an overused term, but they really are thinking of that future and what they can do differently, and not getting stuck in the same rut and the same way things have been done. And I've been inspired by fans. I learned about Star Trek from the fans more than my father. He passed away when I was very young. And it was being inspired by them to think about this future and what we were capable of as humans is what really got me excited about this vision that my father had. So my only encouragement to them and to everyone, as cliche as it might sound, is to just think about it differently. Always think outside the box. Try it a different way. And someone told me once in life, do something that scares you every day. And I can't say I live by that every day. That doesn't mean jumping out of an airplane necessarily. I try to live by that motto to some degree, but do something different, even if it's small, even if it's driving a new way to work, or if you want to jump out of a plane, you can, but do something different every day. Never be afraid to fail. Again, I know it's cliche, I know it's been told, but that's what I would say to the fans.
I have to say that Dr. Dave Albert, who you all met earlier, and the creator of the AliveCore ICG phone, scored tickets for Comic-Con. He'll be out here with his entire family in about a month and a half. So there's one example. Other questions out here?
I guess one comment first was for Dr. Jacobs. You were talking about the future. I already have a lot of those little voices already talking to my head, but that's usually I don't take my drugs in time. But
the real app that runs on your phone will remind you when to take the pill.
But my real question is, once all of that information is coming in at you, are you also doing studies on what's the effect of that on people?
I mean, people do these kinds of attention studies. We're not at the point where we actually have these systems up and running, but as soon as we have these kind of continuous interaction models, we'll absolutely do studies on how it impacts people. No question, because if you don't design the user interface right, it's just going to be annoying, not helpful. I mean, it's like an IVR system. Nobody likes talking to the mechanical voice until they finally figured out how to get it right, and then all of a sudden, it just was okay. That's true. I mean, some of them still stink, right?
Yeah,
but the ones that you don't really notice, you don't notice because they build a good user interface. So, I mean, look, the iPhone's a great example of that. I mean, we spent a long time building more and more functionality in the devices, and a lot of times people said to us, why do I need more stuff in my phone? I can't even use the stuff that's in there. And then Steve Jobs comes along and just makes it easy to use. And then, boom, everything takes off. So, that aspect of figuring out how people are going to use it and making sure that it works well and it doesn't take too much of their attention away and all those kinds of things, it's going to be critical.
So I would like to answer a little bit different, complementing answer to that, as I've been always interested, I said, in intelligence in both biological organisms and machines. I guess that's my life. So human cognition is a very interesting and complex thing. So there's an annoying amount of information that we face every day anyway. So, and we cope with it, some better than some others, but anyway, so there's a filtering problem. But there's also this sort of notion how we adapt to this new situation in processing the same way like we adapt to new physical conditions. You're living in a harsh climate, you adapt physiologically to that. So one of the things that you see in the cognition is, one, you have an ability to sort of ignore. So I've always said that it's a great blessing that you forget things. So you can drop things and you rely on then having that information to be available, which is typically, I would argue that 90% of this audience has happened to telephone numbers after the introduction of a handset, I mean mobile phones and people having those. You don't, in the past, you remembered all sort of telephone numbers. I mean, you go now and I wonder what's happened. Has it changed you in a bad or good way? I wouldn't argue one way or the other. But the other positive thing is that also at the same time, as we are huge pattern recognition machines, pattern recognition machine is sort of generic. It works at any level of the patterns that you have. So if you have a higher abstraction patterns of something of the information in your body, you learn to use it in your cognition in a way that you filter the unnecessary details away. So I always been also addressed the question that, isn't this terrible? I mean, you're just, all the information coming on the web and everything coming, and what happens to our children? I have adult daughters who've been growing up in this era. They actually quite sane, you know, ladies, really doing a very good job of handling a little bit different way, probably occasionally on the information they're doing. So I'm very optimistic in this particular thing. I think we underestimate tremendously the human capability to adjust and adapt, and the elasticity that we have in our cognition. It's just, of course, that it works in good and bad. So, I mean, we are also adopting bad habits. So, my colleague, the head of Nokia Design, always talk about this. You see the romantic encounter, and in the restaurant where, in my generation, we look at in each other's eyes, and we try to do a contact, and instead of, I'm tweeting this thing, so now I'm just like going back and forth. So there are also habits that we adopt for a while, but by the end of the day, so I'm actually very optimistic on this. Cognition will adjust.
Well, we're out of time, and that's a great note, unless Peter or Rod or Paul, any other comments you want to make right now?
I'm going to close by saying how thankful I am to Qualcomm and Paul and to Nokia and Henry for really stepping up to partner with us to do this. So I want to say thank you to them.
Thank you.
Absolutely.